Om Tat Sat. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman or God, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Ji Maharaj, to all the sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. So today we will be studying Sutra number 29 from the Kaivalya Pad of the Raja Yoga Sutras of Patanjali Maharaj. Commentaries by my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Ji, and narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So let's get started. Sutra number 29, Kaivalya Pad. The sutra is Prasankhyane api akusidasya sarvatha vivek khyatir dharma megha samadhi. Again, prasankhyane api akusidasya sarvatha vivek khyatir dharma megha samadhi. The yogi who is dispassionate even towards intuitional knowledge, which is pragya or vivek khyati, that arises during sasmita samadhi, through the ceaseless flow of the same attains dharma megha samadhi. So it's a very important sutra because this is where the yogi eventually achieves liberation, mukti, nirvana. This is the same nirvana, mukti, liberation that Buddha achieved, that Krishna achieved, that Rama achieved, all the Jesus and Christ and all the sages, senior high-level sages and saints, and like our Guruji, both these Gurujis, Swami Shivananda, Swami Jyotirmayananda, these are all highly enlightened masters who have actually achieved self-realization. So the knowledge they are sharing is not just bookish knowledge, it is knowledge through their practical experience, and through that we also, through our self-effort and their divine grace, can achieve this vivek khyati. But we also have to put in our self-effort, and our self-effort on this path, mind you, is also an act of divine grace. It does not come automatically to everybody. That is why people are always running around in the world process, running for the better deal, the next thing, but yet they're always stressful, unhappy, and agitated because the food for the soul is not being addressed. The real joy resides within you. All the happiness comes from within us. See? So this is where through the tapasya, through our penance, when we reach that stage of the highest rung of the lower samadhi. For those of you who have been following this regularly, and you will know we covered these lower samadhis in the Samadhi Pad, which was the very first chapter, and we had talked about how each samadhi of the sampragyat stage, lower stage, takes us to the next level. So it's a progressive stage, just like we need to be in kindergarten, then first, second grade, third grade, and so on. And since we have built upon each of these knowledge bases, we eventually become doctors, engineers, or very successful professors, etc. But there was a stage when we started A for apple, B for boy. And that if you're very new to yoga, do not despair. Just follow the sutras one by one and enjoy it daily. I do it in small increments so you can always find a little bit of time to go through it, but it will be very helpful if you are consistent and regular in your practice. So let's move on to the deeper explanation. So in the Samadhi Pad, we talked that when a yogi advances on the path of Sasmita Samadhi, which is the highest limit of the lower Sampragyat Samadhi, he experiences Vivek Khyati or intuitional knowledge due to the increasing purity of the Chitta. Chitta is the mind stuff from which all these thought waves are coming constantly. So now, since the purity has become so great, so pure, that now this yogi is firmly established in that samadhi state and very, very close to achieving self-realization. So at that point, he achieves this vivek khyati. Vivek means the intuitional knowledge or pragya. And when pragya arises, arises. Pragya arises, that is the beginning of the buds on a spring season on a tree. So now when you can see the buds and the little fragrance and the little spring air, you know that the blossom is coming soon. So that means you are almost ripe to the state of enlightenment. But that will be in the following few sutras. This also means we are almost getting close to the end of our whole scripture, Raja Yoga Sutras, and we are on Sutra number 29, and the last Sutra is Sutra number 34. And after that, we will be starting a new scripture. But that is what Viveka Khyati is. That's called intuitional knowledge. And if this intuitional knowledge is maintained ceaselessly and without any obstruction, so then which means the yogi has to still continue the journey. He cannot get complacent. He cannot become lazy. He cannot think he has already achieved it. Although, granted, he has come a long way from where the average people are. But he still needs to continue the journey, because unless he achieves self-realization, it's like sitting on the treasure but not digging to actually get it. So that's where the this stage is, where the Viveka Khyati comes. Viveka Khyati is the light of seeing the self, and that bliss is absolutely unexplainable. But it has to be maintained and structured for a longer period of time. So a yogi develops, when that happens without any obstruction, Viveka Khyati, which is your consciousness, chitta no longer needs to operate, but inside your purity, you start looking at your consciousness or self in a very deep way. And so then a yogi develops Paravaragya, or supreme dispassion. Paravaragya means the high level of dispassion, where the world almost ceases to exist for him. Of course, it exists in physical terms, but inside, from his inner view, he does not see the world. He begins to see his spirit as distinct from the chitta. That is the real difference between a worldly person and a yogi, that a yogi can see his chitta totally distinct at this stage from his spirit, the consciousness. So he therefore develops a mystic inclination to turn away from the chitta itself. There is no more need for the chitta, because the chitta is there only to give us impressions, thought waves, to keep us sustained in the world process. And so, in other words, the yogi has decoded the illusion process that the chitta is generating. So this state has two aspects. Firstly, the flow of intuitional knowledge becomes increasingly firm and unobstructed. So that's the first thing, which is called pragya. Intuitional knowledge is called pragya, and we don't get it just by reading books. We have to experience it. It's like learning how to swim. You have to get into the water. There is no other way. So when we do that, the knowledge starts becoming more firm and unobstructed, which means we are starting to decode the universe, how all the mysteries behind it work. And that's all coming through God's grace, not through our ego, not through pumping ourselves and saying, look how hard I worked, look how many asanas I did. The minute we think like that, we are disqualified from this holy path. This is the holy path. And to get to know God, you have to become like God. Does that make sense? We have to become totally pure, clean, and ethical, and so on. That is where the practice lies, because we have to clean up all the muck we have accumulated over the years. And secondly, the impressions of Nirodha Samadhi or Asampragyata Samadhi. Remember, this is the highest Samadhi. The lower Samadhis, if you study Samadhi Pad, and I have given you playlists where you can go to these individual chapters and get more details. I have given you every sutra one at a time, so you can chew in small nuggets and enjoy the whole process and also learn along the way. The highest form of super consciousness is the Asampragyata Samadhi. There is nothing higher than that. That means the reason we have been created, given a human life, we are almost there to finish it. So they are developed, and that is called Dharma Megha. These impressions destroy all impressions. So when these impressions are formed of Nirodha Samadhi, Dharma Megha are called clouds of virtue. And Dharma means ethical principles, Dharma. Megha are clouds. So when which rains down the nectar of immortality. So when Dharma Mega showers on the yogi, that is that state of enlightenment, liberation, mukti, nirvana, whatever we may want to call it, but that is the goal of our human birth. These nectarine showers of virtue bring about the end of the burning fever of the affliction of the heart of a yogi, thus leading him to Kaivalya. So now he has finally met his outcome. The bud that we talked about in the last sutra is now fully blossomed into a ripe fruit ready to eat, which means liberation is now at hand. It should be noted that the virtue of Dharma Megha is not virtue in a relative sense. Rather, the highest form of virtue is in the terms of Nirodha Samskaras or impressions of control. Further, Dharma Megha Samadhi, Paravairagya and Nirodha Samadhi, these three occur simultaneously. So basically, when Dharma Megha occurs, Paravairagya comes and Nirodha Samadhi, and then enlightenment pursues. So that's the good news, that we don't have to go through a lot more steps. We are already at that stage where just a little bit, the little Dharma Megha, the cloud of rain, once that showers in abundance, we get enlightened. That is the grace of the God for each of us who are following this holy path of Patanjali Yoga and meditating and learning this process. They are described to occur in sequence only to aid the aspirant to view the state from different perspectives, but they happen very quickly and they happen simultaneously. So the result of Dharma Megha Samadhi is further described in the sutra number 30 that we will cover tomorrow. This is Swami Nikhilananda. Om Tat Sat.